This is ESG Decoded, the podcast powered by Global Affairs Associates to provide relevant, actionable updates related to business innovation and sustainability. Join Kaitlyn Allen and Amanda Shea of Global Affairs Associates for thoughtful, nuanced conversations with industry leaders that explore the complexities, the risks, and the opportunities connected to all things ESG. I'm Yvonne Harris, a consultant and co-host, and I will be collaborating with Kaitlyn and Amanda for the discussions that we will present on this podcast. Put simply, ESG is everything that is not on your balance sheet. This leaves room for misunderstanding, oversimplification, and the tendency towards one-size-fits-all perspectives. None of that will happen on this podcast. Enjoy this episode.
Welcome back to ESG Decoded. I'm Kaitlyn Allen, and today I have Megan Parks with me. Megan is an entrepreneur focused on soil health, regenerative agriculture, and climate change. She's the Executive Vice President of Grassroots Carbon, a public benefit company. Grassroots Carbon helps leading companies remove and store massive amounts of carbon using the power of nature, so they're positioned to win in a carbon-constrained world. Previously, she worked for nearly 2 decades on environmental issues in the energy industry. Megan holds undergraduate and graduate degrees in engineering. Welcome, Megan, to the podcast.
Thanks, Kaitlyn. So happy to be here.
Yeah, we are too. I mean, we do a lot of focus on energy, of course, because so many of our clients are in the energy industry. And while obviously there's connections here, some of your clients, which we'll talk about, to that industry, the agriculture world is a world that we don't often touch on. Certain clients do have touches into that world, but I think that having you on today kind of brings a different perspective for those who are interested in agriculture more generally, regeneration and ranching. So we're really grateful to have you. You guys have just gone through a merger, and I want to start with that because I think that journey helps illustrate where you guys are going with Grassroots Carbon. So Megan was actually a co-founder of Soil Value Exchange, an initiative based in Houston. And they just announced a merger with PastureMap, which is a software that enables ranchers to make better grazing management decisions. And this new entity is called Grassroots Carbon. Could you tell us a little bit about the logic behind the merger and the new combined mission of Grassroots Carbon?
Sure, Kaitlyn. It's been a whirlwind few months. What happened was with Soil Value Exchange, we were a relatively young company. We had made our first sales of soil carbon storage, and we're gearing up to deliver those credits. And my co-founder was reading the magazine Texas Monthly, and he read an article about this gentleman, Lou Mormon, who is one of the owners of PastureMap through a socially responsible investment firm they have called SoilWorks, and they're based in San Antonio. And it looked like the stated public benefit mission of their investing firm was exactly aligned with what we're trying to do with Soil Value Exchange. It was focused on regenerative grazing and scaling up ways to raise, in particular, meat in a way that benefits people and the planet and takes animal agriculture to a whole nother place. And they also own a number of software companies, so that they're really experienced tech veterans. And we were looking for a tech platform because we felt like in the long run for Soil Value Exchange to succeed, we needed a tech partner to be able to deliver what we were hoping to deliver and scale up soil carbon restoration. So we went to see Lou, and voila, 4 or 5 months later, here we are. We've launched a new company together. We merged PastureMap and Soil Value Exchange into a single entity called Grassroots Carbon. Super excited about it. And we'll be keeping the PastureMap brand, and that software will stay. And we're moving forward together to try to help farmers and ranchers who are already doing regenerative grazing get rewarded for that and bring more people under that umbrella to try to experiment with some of those practices that heal the land.
You know, I think some of our listeners, many of them, probably never heard of regenerative grazing don't necessarily know what the difference between that and conventional agriculture is. I will say the documentary Kiss the Ground, which is available on Netflix, does a really good job of explaining this concept for those that want to get a deeper dive. But for our listeners today, could you just give a really brief overview of what regenerative grazing is and why it's so important for mitigating the impacts of climate change?
Sure. Well, the word regenerative is getting a lot of airtime recently in the ESG world. I'm seeing it everywhere. It's almost in danger of becoming another buzzword. But what it really means for in the realm of agriculture is to grow food in a way that works with nature, in partnership with nature, instead of fighting against nature. And the space that we're focused on is grazing. That is our niche. So I usually try to speak to that and not so much row crop agriculture, but the principles are the same. Regenerative to me is not a series of practices that you do. It is a mindset and an approach that you take to how you farm and ranch. So for people who are grazing herds of animals on the land, there are ways. The conventional method is just, let's say you have cattle, just to let them wander wherever they want on your ranch, inside the fence line. And really, there's a bit more to it than that, stocking rates and all that stuff. But in a nutshell, it's free roam. But there is another way to graze that tries to mimic the way that grassland ecosystems co-evolved with migrating herds of grazers, because grasslands and grazers go together in nature. They need each other to thrive. And so it's like mimicking the bison on the prairie in North America. And you do that by fencing the herd in temporarily into much smaller paddocks and then rotating those off. So any given area of your land will be intensively grazed for a very short time period, maybe a day, sometimes less. And then the herd leaves and that land rests for a very long period of time, months. And you do that in a way that adapts to what the weather is doing, what the land looks like, what the plant communities look like. So it's really a lot of observing. That's the difference in a nutshell for grazing.
And so is that the tool that Pasture Map, the software, is helps ranchers with? Is that the mapping process?
Exactly.
Okay.
So yeah, people that ranch like this typically have a grazing plan. Sometimes it'll be on pen and paper or maybe Excel. And so Pasture Map just makes it a lot easier to track where they've been and for how long, stocking rates on any given piece of land, and allows you to do a little bit of predictive. And it generates reports that you could submit to NRCS, which is the Department of Agriculture's Natural Resource Conservation Service. It keeps your whole team on the same page. You can see where the fences are broken. You can put in little toggles that show you things like that.
Very cool. Yeah. So, I think now having an understanding of it a little bit more, it makes perfect sense to me why this merger makes so much sense, why the Soil Value Exchange and Pasture Map merger makes sense. But tell us a little bit then about Grassroots Carbon. Where are you going from here? What are your sort of short-term goals for the near future and your long-term vision?
Sure. Well, before I go there, I probably need to link regenerative grazing to carbon storage. Another wonderful side effect of grazing alongside nature in partnership is that these kind of techniques end up essentially restoring the prairie to health. So most of our grasslands in North America are highly degraded. They have been either overgrazed, I'm sort of say that in air quotes, or plowed up and replanted with these short-rooted, European so-called improved pasture grasses. It's just not in great condition. And when you start doing regenerative grazing, it starts to bring back those deep-rooted native prairie plants and a much more diverse plant community, which then can support a wide array of wildlife. So the whole ecosystem recovers. And when that happens, it also sucks a lot of CO2 out of the atmosphere and stores it securely underground. How that happens is by the ancient technology of photosynthesis. It's simply the plants. Plants are already doing this for millions of years, of course, hundreds of millions of years. But what you're doing is speeding up that process. So many of our grasslands have lost a lot of their carbon. They've lost some of their topsoil, and we're essentially just putting that back. A lot of it goes down. It's mediated by the roots. So it's just, CO2 converted to sugars. Part of that goes into growing the plant, but a large part of it goes out through the roots to feed the soil microbes. And because these prairie plants have roots that go down 6 to 9 feet or more, as long as you don't plow that land up, and even if you do, if you're not touching down there at 9 feet, it stays tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of years once you get below the top 10 to 30 centimeters. So it's a very stable, secure way to capture and sequester atmospheric CO2. So it's sort of like nature's way of carbon capture and storage, one of nature's ways. And it's very, very stable. So it's not like forests that can burn down. You can't, fire actually helps grasslands in certain cases. Fire was a part of these systems. So it's very stable. And that's the connection we need to make between regenerative grazing and carbon. So what I'm hoping for the next 5 years of the new entity of Grassroots Carbon, we're so excited because with the merger with PastureMap, we're bringing into our portfolio a whole bunch of additional farmers and ranchers on more than 4 million acres of grazing lands. So it will allow us to provide, millions of tons of carbon storage every year. Not instantly, of course, because not all of those ranchers might choose to want to sell carbon with us, but we're very hopeful that we can, earn their trust and offer a really attractive, transparent package for people to get paid to store carbon on their land.
So Megan, I know a lot of people's first question is going to be, how do you measure? Is this just like we think this happens because of photosynthesis, or is there a way to measure and verify?
Sure. Yeah. Well, as with any carbon credit, most buyers of such things are looking for a third-party verification. And so for the carbon storage that we're selling in 2021, we have chosen to work with a new carbon storage standard called B Carbon. B Carbon, it's relatively new, but it's heavily research-based. It grew out of an initiative of the Baker Institute of Public Policy at Rice University. And it was created in order to provide soil carbon storage credits of the highest quality to meet not only the needs of carbon buyers, but importantly, to meet the needs of landowners, to allow more landowners to participate in carbon markets. So what B Carbon do is they provide an independent third-party certification. They have a bunch of rules around how you have to measure, and all B Carbon certified carbon storage credits have to be backed up by rigorous soil measurements. So those measurements are taken according to a measurement standard that was actually developed under Verra, which is one of the other leading voluntary offset standards, but it's allowed under B Carbon. And it's essentially 3-foot deep soil cores taken, sent to a lab and analyzed, and then they have to meet rigorous statistical protocols. So you have to have a certain statistical confidence interval that it's kind of analogous for the energy company listeners, people who have background in reservoir engineering like myself. You don't literally know exactly how much oil is in a reservoir, for example, because you can't see down there. Same with soil, but using science and statistics, you can drill a certain number of holes, right, and make a forecast that is statistically valid for to generalize it over the area of the ranch. So that's basically what we're doing with the soil measurements. Those measurements, of course, are very expensive, and we are paying for them. The landowners do not have to pay anything out of pocket. We wanted to make it very easy for ranchers to participate in this. But yes, they're all the credits are backed up by real soil measurements and third-party certification and audit.
That's so interesting. I mean, it's one of those things that, nature-based solutions, and I'll never forget when I first met Hank Neuwer, your business partner. He was at a conference, it was in Houston, and he came in with a big bucket of dirt, and sort of a little mat, and he dumped it on the table to start his speech on the panel. And I remember everyone being like, what did he just do? I can't believe he just did that. And his message, and it still holds true, is that I think a lot of people see a big pile of dirt, or they think soil carbon, and they think that's too easy. We can't solve climate change with dirt and plants. Like, no, it's this highly technical problem that we need to engineer 1,000 different solutions for. And it just, I don't know, Megan, is it too easy? I mean, it just seems too simple. Could we really solve climate change with soil carbon storage? I mean, some of the things that you guys say, we could restore, what is it, half of America's grasslands would store all of the US carbon. And correct me if that's what I remember from a presentation I saw, but correct me if I'm wrong. But is it just, this seems too simple?
We hear that a lot. The soil on the table thing, I believe Hank did that in the boardroom at Shell. He used to work for Shell. That's probably the first time that's ever happened in the C-suite of Shell. Yeah, we do hear that, especially, oh, bless us engineers. We just feel like there has to be, where are the pipelines? Where are the pumps? Where is the steel? In fact, we've given presentations where we explain basically what I've just explained to you with, the cows, the bison, whatever you're using, and the plants. And then the first question that's asked is, but where do you put the CO2 pipeline, or where do you put the pumps? Mm-hmm. The plant is the pump. It doesn't look like a chemical engineer like me is expecting. I don't necessarily like to phrase things as this is the solution to climate change, because I'm not sure I believe that climate change has a solution. I think that what's needed is a multitude of things. And the beauty of soil carbon storage as part of a solution is that it is available at massive scale. So the talking point that you're referring to about half the grasslands, that one is the US has about 650 million acres devoted to grazing animals. We have hundreds of millions of acres of grasslands in North America. And if half of the people who were managing the herds on those grazing lands were to, I wave a magic wand and they convert over to regenerative grazing, intensive, doing it all the way tomorrow, we could be storing up to 10 to 25% of the US carbon footprint every year of the whole United States. So it's massive. The potential is so big. It's like we're standing on this massive soil carbon sponge, but to unlock it, the power lies in the hands of these farmers and ranchers, these land managers, and they actually have to make a change. They hold the key. And so that's why we started Soil Value Exchange, because the potential is too big not to pursue this as part of the solution. I think it goes alongside the other technologies, but this technology, as a tech person, one of the things I love about it is that it's beautiful. The footprint of grassland soil carbon storage is literally beautiful. And I don't think you can necessarily say that about some of the other technologies, which doesn't mean we don't need them, but you can, we had,
I know we're both picturing the direct air capture plants and thinking, and
don't put this on the pod.
I was going to say, I know we're both picturing direct air capture plants as something that's not as beautiful. And yes, we need all technologies. Yes, we need them all on the table. But the fact that this natural solution, works, is measurably verifiable, and is also aesthetically pleasing to people, to see a thriving field full of wildflowers and wildlife and all the beautiful things that go along with it. I think it's really unique. And on top of that, I think there's this connection to restoring communities as well. And, helping farmers and ranchers do better. I mean, they make more money. That's my understanding, is they can actually have a more profitable farm by using these practices. And that's an injection of resources into rural America.
Yeah, I really do encourage people to watch the Kiss the Ground movie on Netflix. It's so well done. And there's a number of other movies on our website, buildgrassroots.com, just 12-minute films that where the ranchers talk in their own words about their journey with this. And it's true that in the long run, these kind of grazing techniques can lead to a much more profitable operation, because you are essentially growing more grass, right? More forage on the same amount of land. So sometimes it's as much as doubling or tripling the amount of grasses that you're growing. So you could double or triple the number of animals you have without ever acquiring any more land. And in the long run, it makes a lot more money. There are some transition costs, for people to switch over, that are not insignificant. And so another thing we're hoping, if I think about my 5-year dream, is that we really begin working with people who are curious about it, or at least not resistant to transitioning, and just need support in terms of low-cost transition finance, low-interest loans. There's a lot of people out there providing direct-to-farmer financing, and I cannot wait to partner with them and help people through this transition, and just make it so easy and so attractive and so alluring, even more so than a potential new carbon revenue stream is, right? Because you do have to purchase a little bit of portable electric fencing, which is not that expensive. The big cost is water. If you're going to move the herd a lot, they have to be able to drink water everywhere they go. So you either need to invest in very expensive water piping, or rig up a portable water source that you could truck around with them. And that is not insignificant.
I mean, I think, to me, when I see this more broadly speaking, it's something that you and I have talked about, which is this solution in particular is about so much more than the carbon. And I think sometimes, I certainly see this both around town and just in general in the things we read, there seems to be almost this really reductionist focus on carbon, which of course carbon equivalent means greenhouse gases, but without seeing them as part of the larger ecosystem. And, what does that mean for the dialogue? Like, where do we need to go in general, in climate change circles, in political circles, in advocacy circles, in corporate circles? Where do you think this dialogue needs to be going?
Yeah, that's such a great question. When I take off when I go home at the end of the day, or in this COVID world, when I, go from my desk to my not desk, and just thinking as a human being, what I want to see how we talk about climate change shift beyond just carbon. I'm quite worried about what I call carbon reductionism. I think I stole that from someone, an author, because it doesn't seem big enough. I feel like climate change is more a symptom than a problem. It's a symptom of the way Western industrial growth civilization is running. I think back to 20 years ago when I first got interested in sustainability, or at that time we talked a lot about this term sustainable development, because it's very clear to me as a young person, we cannot keep living this way. With, at that time, how many people were there? I don't know, 8 billion. Now we're headed for 10 billion. And this thing we're doing, this juggernaut, it just does not work for life. And we have to find ways to invent and design like nature designs, so that we can have complexity, a complex civilization in harmony with life. And, one of the reasons why I interrupted my energy industry career mid-stop, is I started to learn that, oh gosh, I'm an innovator. That's what this is. Because I was always interested in how do we move beyond the current paradigm to create something new. And at the time, I felt like I could better contribute from the outside. It's been very interesting and rewarding to look now, 6 years after I made that leap, and see how much internal innovation is trying to happen inside some of these major corporations. It's actually pretty encouraging, but always the crazy outside is where some of the best ideas come from. And so you actually need both. But anyway, back to carbon reductionism. I just feel like when I happened across regenerative ag, which was almost an accident, I just intuit there's some kind of aha here, because here's something that can be done. We're going to eat anyway, right? We need to do so in a life-giving way.
Megan, I think what you touch on is something that I often bring up to folks that, perhaps don't agree with climate science, or don't agree with the fact that we need an energy transition. And I tell them, we can kind of, bicker about the different technicalities or this or that. But at the end, and I just said this on Tuesday last week at the Petroleum Club in Houston, we have to get beyond this battle of wills and really ask ourselves, are we living well on this planet? Are we really conserving nature? Are we really protecting the future of this earth for future generations? And I don't think I've ever met anyone that can raise their hand and say yes. Even the folks that say maybe disagree with, they look at geologic time and, this and that. And I say, you know what, go ahead and have that debate in the ivory tower. That's fine. But are we living well? Can we really sustain the way that we live? So endless new construction, endless building out of developments, new roads, big buildings, concrete, etc. Can we really do that? And could every of the potentially 10 billion people live with our level of luxury, etc.? We couldn't. There's simply not enough resources on Earth. And so I totally get where you're going with this, which is, I think, like you said, it's bigger than the carbon. It's bigger than the greenhouse gases. It's these effects that we're seeing is this symptom of Earth saying, like, whoa, y'all need to slow down. We all need to slow down and take a look and think, wow, maybe we can disagree about this policy approach, or we can disagree about, the solution set and what the solution set should look like or shouldn't look like. But at the end of the day, I think everyone kind of knows deep down, this probably isn't right.
Yeah. I'd like to see, I think this is happening to an extent, but I'd like to see the environmental movement, of which I consider myself a part, move away out of the guilt thing, the sort of the sky is falling, let's all feel horrible because our North American lifestyles are so resource intensive, and look at all these people that have nothing, and guilt and shame. Guilt and shame are not good motivators. That's not to say we should all be off the hook. It's just that life is complicated and humans are complicated. And when I think about regenerative ag and what we're trying to do, I think of this as sort of rudimentary early day experiments in life-giving technologies. I'm excited that someday, far beyond my time here, maybe humanity goes and really learns how to design with nature and learns how to understand complex adaptive systems. Complexity science is something I don't know a lot about, but I've heard about in recent years. And it's very encouraging, because one of the properties of complex systems, I'm going to get out of my depth here really fast talking about this.
Okay, go for it.
Is that they have emergent properties that cannot be predicted. And that's distinct from complicated systems, which, you can predict. So example of complicated is it does not self-repair. a complex system self-repairs. So right now, humans can build, when we build technology, we build things like airplanes or oil refineries. When an airplane breaks, it does not heal itself. It does not fix itself, right? You have to go in there with the crew and fix it. It's complicated tech. It's not complex. So living systems are complex. One characteristic of a living system, your own body or the soil, the land, the earth, this happens at all scales, is that they have a quality of self-repair. And in my dream for humanity, we fast forward in time and we learn to understand complexity science. Somehow we marry that with some kind of spiritual orientation to this planet. And we then begin to design technology that is much more similar to how nature designs. Will we ever design things that self-repair? I don't know. But that kind of thought process keeps me going sometimes and gets me through the sort of guilt, despair, shame thing. That on the horizon as a goal is a worthy, inspiring goal. And for anybody that has young people in their life, kids, grandkids, people that you care about, or nieces, nephews, that kind of thinking helps me go forward and still work at this interface on climate issues, working in Houston with many people working in extractive industries. We're basically all in this together, right? We can maybe go to Mars. I know there are people that Elon Musk wants to die on Mars, and maybe we'll go there. But if we're going to go out into the solar system and trash all these other planets, it's like we're so much better than that. Let's be better than that, right? Let's go out there and find ways to mine asteroids, if we're going to mine asteroids now, in a way that's life-giving. There's got to be a way, right? Let's not be limited. Let's have unlimited imagination. So
that was amazing. That was so beautiful. And I hope that our listeners, I hope it sparks a lot of thoughts and reflection. I think that's really what we all need to be doing, is this bigger reflection, like beyond the carbon, right? What does this really mean? But just to take it back to, we're talking about the guilt and the shame and the all of that. I know that one of the criticisms of this practice is the role that cows and cattle play, right? We talk about meat consumption. There's a lot out there about meat consumption being, one of the very high impact activities that humans have that contributes to climate change. How do you respond to that?
One thing we say sometimes in our team is it's not the cow, it's the how. The meat thing is another question where I feel like it's not an either or, it's a both and. Sort of like when we were talking about the climate change solutions, or a portfolio of potential responses to the predicament of climate change. Everybody eats, and it's true that a lot of the meat consumption that's going on is highly unsustainable and really pretty horrific, actually. Factory farming, and if anyone has ever driven by a feedlot or visited, it's very troubling. And so I think that how the animal is raised and how it is slaughtered and processed to be eaten matters a lot. And I also think that it's pretty unfair to stand in judgment of farmers and ranchers. For those of us who are eaters, who are not farmers and ranchers, it's often really easy to stand on the sidelines and criticize when you're not living it, and you're not living the stresses and the financial stresses and the risk of people who raise our food. But it is possible to raise carbon neutral or even carbon negative beef. There have been just a couple of life cycle analysis published studies of some of the leading ranchers who are doing these practices. We do, when doing a carbon project, often we get asked about methane from cattle, and that is a consideration. if you're purchasing a carbon offset, the different carbon offset standards might handle this slightly differently. Typically, there's some kind of netting calculation that goes into things. How it's handled under B carbon is that as long as the emissions from your total operation have not increased beyond what they would have been had before you got started in B carbon, you're good. However, if they've increased, you have to subtract off that excess from the total amount of carbon storage that you can sell. But what B carbon is selling is only the total net increase in soil organic carbon. So in some ways, it's a much more conservative estimate than what's allowed under other standards, because other standards will allow you to, if you did less bad, so you used less fertilizer, you can get a lot of emission credits for that. We're not allowing that. We're only allowing the net measured increase in the soil organic carbon. So I think there are ethical issues with meat consumption, and I have a lot of vegan friends and I admire them. And I don't think it's an either or. I think for people that choose to eat meat, you can source it much more sustainably from ranchers like the ones that we're working with. We actually have a friend of Grassroots Carbon, Russ Conser, who runs a company called Blue Nest Beef. And they are a mail order service. They're just one of many, but they're a mail order service. And all of their meats are provided by farmers and ranchers whose ranches are certified by the National Audubon Society to be bird-friendly ranches, because healthy grasslands support the migratory bird populations that come up from South America and fly over to Canada. And so we've lost millions of grassland birds. And by bringing the grasslands back, we bring the birds back. And so I think it's almost impossible to separate grazing animals from these ecosystems. We've talked about how we need them. We know we're going to be raising meat in this country. And so let's just have at least a portion of that, and hopefully a much larger portion of that, be done in a way that nourishes not just humans, but nourishes the entire ecosystem, the entire ecology.
I think that goes back to this, instead of this subtractive mentality, we'll cut out oil and we'll cut out plastics and we'll cut out meat. It's like, those are just, it's like a Band-Aid. It doesn't actually change the system. And I think, if cows and animals like cattle, they're all an integral part of that ecosystem, right? Of grasslands ecosystems. It's not necessarily about like cutting all this stuff out. It's about how do we put that different and more holistic complexity lens on the system, in this case, an ecosystem, and say what's actually not a subtractive way, but a holistic, complex way to think about a system and to think about how its different components interact with one another.
Yeah, I mean, grazers and grasslands need each other. We are certainly not advocates for chopping down rainforest or chopping down forest and, starting a cattle ranch. That's
right.
The opposite. Yes. When and where that does happen in the world, oftentimes there's many other pressures. Again, it's complicated. Right now, for the time being, we're only working in North America with North American farmers and ranchers. That might be temporary. We might, ultimately expand out into other countries. But I'm doing this with eyes wide open. We're very conscious of, trying to avoid unintended consequences from this work.
Mm-hmm. I have one more thing I want to bring up just at the very end of this conversation is your clients. So just bringing it back, I want to again point out that, we're based in Houston. The investors are in San Antonio. A lot of this is happening in Texas. It's very exciting just as a Texan, as a Houstonian, to see so much of this innovation in the space happening in our state and in the energy industry. So you recently announced a soil carbon purchase by Marathon Oil Corporation. Full disclosure, they're one of our clients. And I think it's just really interesting, how, again, from the outside, people are, all up in arms about everything. And we're actually seeing this marrying of the two worlds happening in real time here in Houston. So I would like to just give you an opportunity, if you want to, just for last couple of minutes, talk about that customer. If you want to add in Shopify, I know is also a customer. Just any brief thoughts about why these customers are partnering with Grassroots Carbon.
Sure. Yeah, we've been really honored that companies like Marathon Oil and Shopify and a few others who we're working with have chosen to work with us as part of their carbon solution. Marathon, I think that this purchase they've made of soil carbon storage with Grassroots Carbon really establishes them as a leader. Because if we think about this as a technology, a new technology, because like carbon capture and storage or direct air capture or many different things that companies are looking at on their menu of carbon footprint options, not too many people are out there talking, especially not energy companies, about nature-based solutions. One big exception is Shell. Shell's made a huge commitment to nature-based solutions. But in the independent energy companies, I think, this is Marathon taking a leadership position. And we actually had a few representatives from Marathon out at a ranch last month at Lois Sneery's ranch in Matagorda County, because it's located pretty close to Houston. And we got some really great footage of Carrie Harpole, Marathon's sustainability manager, out there with Loy. And she was talking about why they chose to work with us. And in a nutshell, it's that iconic story. It's not just about the carbon, it's about ecosystem restoration. So if you're paying for it out of your carbon sequestration budget, it's much less expensive than some of these other emerging technologies that are hundreds of dollars a ton. And you not only get access to rigorous measured carbon storage, independently certified, but you get wonderful stories about how you're impacting the community near your operations. And you can literally drive by the ranch and see the beauty and the birds, and the pollinators that your purchase is supporting. And so I think it makes a great story. And you can go talk to real live human beings who are benefiting from the investment that you've made. So I think it makes it real for people. And I think it's going to be really valuable for employees. If I was a young person wondering if I should go into the oil and gas business during a time of energy transition, I think that companies are going to really be thinking about how do they attract the talent to come into this industry for the future. And so being involved with a multitude of different technology options, it's like there's something for everyone. It's not just this niche thing on the side for the environmental people. This is about humans working together to unlock all these technologies. And nature, obviously I'm biased, but I put my money on nature as the most alluring, attractive technology to invest in for the future.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful note to end on. We always do a fun question, so we'll make this one really quick. But what's the last road trip you took, and would you recommend it?
Ooh, yes. Last fall, we went camping in Caprock Canyon State Park in the Panhandle of Texas. I would highly recommend it. There are actually bison there. They do bison conservation.
No way.
We saw, and they free wander throughout the camp. That we saw prairie dogs. I have a big prairie dog community. We saw a roadrunner.
Wow.
We saw cranes. It was amazing. Totally recommended.
Cool. Very cool.
Caprock Canyon State Park.
Well, lots of love for Texas in this episode today. Check out Caprock Canyon and buildgrassroots.com to learn more about Megan's company, Grassroots Carbon. And, feel free to engage with us there on our websites and, of course, across social media where ESG Decoded is posted. Thank you so much, Megan. We really, really enjoyed having you.
Thanks, Kaitlyn. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to ESG Decoded. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you consume yours, and follow ESG Decoded and Global Affairs Associates across social media platforms. Until our next episode, take what you learned today to drive long-term value for your organization by doing good for people and for the planet.